Hi, this video is an introduction to my RTB2004 Rohde Schwarz scope. I've had this scope now about 6 months and extremely happy with it. I have a number of scopes, or lucky to have a number of scopes. I use also a older Rohde DS2000 series, and I'm also lucky enough to have a Keysight 3000 series. This scope I particularly like because of the large screen, which in comparison to the Keysight is about 60% larger in physical area, and that's just the physical waveform area, not with the menus, and I think about 70% larger in area than my Rohde. I think a few people have commented on the screen being glossy and having finger marks on it, and I did find that initially, and what I actually did, which was incredibly easy to do and cost only in the UK about £4 to do, was I got some screen protectors which are actually designed I think for the HD Fire tablet, the Amazon Fire tablet. I bought these from Amazon, £4 for 2 screen protectors, and I made a template of the screen, just a plastic template of the screen exact to size. I stuck that template on to the screen protector and then cut the screen protector out, and in actual fact that's now got a matte finish screen protector on it, so it doesn't show any finger marks anymore. In actual fact I think it improves the feel of the screen in that it makes these slightly more resistant to sliding than say the gloss screen, but it's a personal thing. You can also get glossy screen protectors, but this one was a matte one and I particularly wanted a matte one. I managed to fit that with no bubbles, and it's gone on and stayed on now for about probably 6 weeks, and so far it's fared perfectly with no marks at all on it. The other thing that I'm using on this scope, which I think improves the operation of it, or the UI operation of it, is I'm using a USB mouse, just an optical cheap USB £4 or £5 mouse, which is plugged into the front USB port, and that allows me to control everything on the scope. You've got the pointer here. It allows me to go up to the menu, so if I want to do a run stop I can click on it there, and I've now gone into run stop mode, click on it again and I'm running again. I'm just displaying a small small sine waveform here, but this allows you to operate virtually every single thing that you can operate with the front buttons is mirrored in icons on the screen here, or also on the menu here. So you've got a menu here that gives you all your controls, and that menu expands by going up and down, and again you can do the same thing. So if I bring my mouse over to that point, I can actually slide up and down. I can choose what I want here. If I want to go into the measure menu, I just click on it and I'm into the measure menu. So I'm going to go through all the menus, but you can basically go to any of the operations by using an on-screen icon, and sometimes it's easier in actual fact and more direct, I feel, to use the on-screen icons than some of the buttons. It's just what you get used to. For this video I've actually moved this scope. Normally I have the scope high level and the mouse on a lower level work surface, so it's a little bit difficult for me to get used to the mouse at this angle, the way I'm filming it. But ordinarily I find that the mouse is fantastic. It also stops you getting any finger marks at all on the screen, and quite frankly about 90% of the time now I'm operating it using the mouse. A lot of people might not like that. I might just want to use either the buttons or alternatively just using your hand on the actual screen. The other thing that I do is that I also brought and added to this a Netgear Wi-Fi signal booster, which has got an RJ45 Ethernet connector in it at the base here. So this I think is a Netgear EX2700 Wi-Fi range extender. I think they're about £15 in the UK from Amazon, and with this device I've got this scope. I've got another one of these already wired in at the moment to the scope, because I have a few of these, and therefore this scope is on my network, and I can operate the scope from any PC or Mac or even a tablet. Because this is on, you can see the network icon up here, the green, showing that it's connected to my network. This is a 300 megabits per second network extender, and I find that the interface in terms of using it with a web browser such as Safari on a Mac for instance is flawless, very quick. it's almost instantaneous, so you don't notice any difference from selecting things on the screen of a computer, which I will go through later on in probably this video or the second video, showing how you can use that. This scope comes with, or didn't come with rather, this scope I had has the mixed signal option, so I've got two of these which are the mixed signal logic probes, and these are 8 probes, so it's 16 channels, so you get 2 of these. It comes with a meter of cable, so you've actually got a meter of this cable, you've got your probe part, and then you've got your probe wires here for connecting, so that gives you your logic channels for doing decodes. If we run through the scope here, we've got, just to run through quickly on the buttons, and then I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the features and then we can go into a little bit more detail. But if I just run through quickly, we've got the zoom button here, which gives you standard sort of zoom mode on a scope, but the beauty of this zoom mode is that because it's a touch screen, you can segregate your zoom section, which is your top part, from your normal waveform display, and therefore you can choose how much of one to the other you want. Again, if I'm using the mouse, so you can see my blue pointer there, I'm picking it up, clicking on the mouse, I can drag on the mouse, and the control on this, it's following the mouse instantly. This is the latest version of firmware. There was a couple of criticisms that the UI was a little bit laggy. I don't see it, and I certainly don't see it on this latest version of firmware, which I think is 1.2.10. I will check that later on. Actually it is, it's 01.210, and that's the latest version. I think it was from about the 30th of May 2017. If I switch the zoom off, we've got the horizontal menu here, so where you've got your trigger position in the center on this scope, as you can do on some other scopes or higher end scopes, you can have your trigger position on the left, so I've just moved it to the left. I can have it on the middle. If I want to do it with the mouse, I can click on the right. One of the other advantages with the mouse is that I've got the little spin wheel here, and in actual fact on most menus you can click on it, go inside the menu, and I'm now using the spin wheel to position whether I want left, middle or right, and then just come out of it and click, and I've selected it. You've got your time scale here and your horizontal position, so you can offset your horizontal position if you want to. With any of these you can also type them in, so if I double click on this, it brings up, or I could touch it, it brings up my horizontal keyboard, touchscreen keyboard. I can then put on, if I want to move 500 microseconds to the left, I can actually put in 500 minus, enter, and I've moved, actually I've gone beyond my limit, but I would have moved to my horizontal position 500 microseconds. I can't do it on the way I'm zoomed in at the moment on this time base. Now if I come out of the horizontal menu, got the acquisition menu here. Let's just bring the waveform back in. Actually, if I push, all of these buttons are center push, so if I push to center, I should center all of my waveforms. Why isn't that centering? That's interesting. Let's just see where I put my horizontal. Maybe I put my horizontal on the right. Sorry, put my horizontal in the middle. That would help me to start. And then if I now push to center, I'm going to be back on my center point again with my, not sure why that's not doing that, but have a look at that later. Not sure why I'm not doing that. Coming down, you've got your channel buttons here, so channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. These are all color coded, as are the dials, so when you select, oh, I know why that wasn't working. I had that, these dials are color coded, I wasn't thinking straight. These dials are color coded to the operation of either a channel, or in this instance I was on the protocol or the generator, so they change in color relative to what operation you've got here. So if you're on logic probes, which I won't be able to switch on, it would go into a different color to represent that. If I switch on channel 2 now, you'll see it may not show up so well on the camera, but this is now a green colour. If I switch channel 3 on, it's an orangey colour, and when I go back to channel 1 it goes yellow, green, orange. And the same thing with the source, which is used for your trigger here. If you click on this, you'll see that's gone out of triggering, because I'm now selecting channel 3 as the trigger, orange. I'm now back in trigger again, sorry, no I'm not, I'm back in trigger now because I've now selected channel 1. I'd selected channel 4 before for the trigger, which was here. You don't actually have to have the channel on to have an input going into it, so that's why it will go through the whole 1, 2, 3, 4 and back to 1 again as the source. So if I switch off my other channels now, I can actually do it by double clicking on the button once the menu's up, or I can actually do it channel 3. I can go to the menu at the bottom, click on the C3, which is here, bring it up and click on off, and now it's switched my channel off. So these are your channel representations, channel 1, 2, 3 and 4, your generator sort of set menu, and these have the sensitivity on them, the probe setting, so 1 to 1, 10 to 1, etc., whether it's AC or DC coupled, so you can have all the information on the bottom, which is actually quite nice because very quickly you can instantly see what your channel settings are in its entirety. When I was trying before to move my waveform back, if I'm not easy to see on this, but if I move my waveform over and I now click my position, it's gone straight back to the center. The reason it didn't do it the first time was I made an error and I was on the other channel. I wasn't actually on the first channel, which is why it didn't do it. You've got a logic menu here, which won't come up at the moment because I don't have, it just tells you to please connect the logic probes, because I haven't got the logic probes which plug into here. So you've got your D0 to 7 there, first 8 channels, and then your second pair of 8, D8 to D15 for your logic channels. So if we switch that off, I can just do back. This button allows you to switch on your logic probes which plug into this port. So that's the RTZL03, which is this. So if I plug in my connector to there, and that goes in, that's got a meter of cable, and that's into my D0, I actually get coming up, rather I will get coming up when I plug that in and switch on, I get my logic channels. Now I've only got 4 showing there, but if I push that again, I'll get my menu coming up. I can also adjust my settings here, so the D7 to D0, if I push on that, these are my channels. I can select all of them. If I switch off channel 1, it'll be easier to see. So I've now got these channels here which I can move up and down. So that's my D0, my D1, click on it, select it. If you've got them close together, when you click on, you get this selector which allows you to, sorry, if I've got a whole bunch together, if I click within a bunch, I can get this and I can select D4. That means that I've now got channel D4 which I can move. Now you also get a light coming on the probe, so you've actually got a light on the actual probe itself. So you've got 2 of these for D0 to D7 and D8 to D15. So if you've got 2 of these on a table and you've got say 2 things that you're monitoring, you can tell which one of these. You've got maximum of 40 volts, maximum peak. These are 100 kilo ohms and 4 picofarads. I've actually used these up to 50 megahertz, and I am going to demonstrate that later on. But I've actually used these to measure signals up to 50 megahertz, and that's and caught those and analysed them perfectly. And of course this goes into your logic analyzer, so if you want to do I2C, things like that, you can select them on this. Your menu for that is here. So when we click on the menu, you can select which channels you want. So if we just say, for instance, wanted 3 channels, we could actually just say we want D0, D1 and D2. So we've selected 3 logic probe channels. We can then also go to menu, we can change, so I can change the height of those by clicking on this, which then changes the height of the signals if you were receiving signals. Difficult to see, just the lines moving at the moment. You can also select menu, and this allows us to set our user levels for those, so TTL, CMOS, ECL, 1.3 volt, 2.5 or 1.4, and also user level. So if you're clicking on user level as we are here, we can then go into that and we can set our user level, and it tells you here minimum of -2 volts, maximum of 8 volts. So I want to set my logic threshold at 3 volts, so I go 3, enter, and I've now set that. My hysteresis, which controls the switching around which level it switches, can be controlled to small, medium and large, and the instruction manual actually gives you the scales of those. You can also label your signals, so at the moment D0 is labelled as clock. I can actually go into here, and if I wanted to put D0 as data, for instance, I've now got D0 as data, or you can just have them as their own numbers, or you could edit the label, and if you wanted to put data, say 1, 2 for data 12, say, go enter, and now we've entered that. So we've entered a label as data 12, and I think you'll find it's quite small on the screen, but you've got the channel there. Oh wait, that's D2. Now I've got D1, and over this side here we've got the word data, here data 12. So I've got cursors on as well. Let me switch cursors off. So I've got rid of cursors. Okay, and that's the logic. With the logic probes it turns blue here, so these scales can be altered. You can see those lines moving for the vertical sensitivity. So you can use these buttons, instantly tell you that they're now working for the logic. If we select 1, switch channel 1 on again, these buttons now go back to yellow again to say that they're controlling the yellow. If we were monitoring, say, an analog channel and a digital channel, we can then go back to logic, and now that these are now controlling, you can see them moving by me altering the vertical sensitivity. They're moving those. If I go back to channel 1, I'm now instantly altering my vertical sensitivity on my sine wave input from my function generator in here. Okay, switch that off. And that's off. I've now got my reference waveform menu, which again is for reference reference signals. Let's bring that up. And in actual fact, I've got stored in memory as a white channel the reference copy for this waveform. I put that into memory earlier on. The reference menu here, you can copy channels, channel 1 or R1, sorry, there's only 2 there at the moment. The source is either, at the moment, because only channel 1 is switched on, I can only copy from channel 1, or I can deal with my actual reference waveform and tell it that the source is now the reference waveform. I can load references, save references here as well. We'll go back over that again in a later point. If I switch that off, then I've got my maths channel here, which if I push it again, I've got my maths menu coming up, and I can switch my maths menu on and off here. My maths menu is taking channel 1 and adding to it channel 2. I can subtraction, multiplication and division, so I can change what it does on that. I've accidentally switched that off, so I go to there, go to maths, click on maths, and I've got it there. I can go back to remove that menu. If I want to remove maths, I can click on the word maths here, or use my finger and switch it off. So maths off, and now my maths channel is off. Now I've got channel 2 on. Switch channel 2 off. I click on C2 and flick on off, and I'm off there now. Okay, let's switch off the logic channel probes. Right, so coming back to these side of buttons, we've got auto normal mode, which you have on most normal scopes for triggering. You've got your run stop button, You've got your single capture button, which stops the machine and stops the oscilloscope rather, and takes a single shot capture, and you've got force trigger button. This is for your level, for your TTL level, for adjusting your TTL level for adjusting your trigger level. And all of these buttons are indented, so they've got indents, they're not smooth turning, and actually I quite like that. Some people don't like it, particularly when you're using it for cursors. I think it's quite good. It's just a personal thing, but you could either alter your level, your trigger level here, using that button which I'm turning, or alternatively I can use my mouse to move the trigger level, and you can see the adjustment up here, or I can type the figure in by just touching my trigger level amount, 870 millivolts. If I want, say, 1.2 volts, I just go enter, and I'm now at 1.2 volts, and my trigger level is right up the top. I switch that off, or I can just drag it manually, or I can drag it with my finger manually. And again, very responsive and very accurate. You can move it very small amounts, so I find that very useful. Maybe because of the screen covering, I just think that it's now got slightly more friction with the matte covering, and I find the screen covering, I've got used to it, I much prefer it, but it's a personal thing. You may prefer the glossy covering. Put it back onto run mode again. Over here you've got buttons, the action buttons that they call. So you've got touch lock, which actually locks your touch, so it stops you moving anything by touch, and nothing now will adjust, none of the menus will adjust. It's now only for the buttons. If I take the touch lock off, it's instant. Some scopes, like the Keysight, unfortunately take quite a while to regenerate when you take the touch lock off. This is instant, so I've got my scope moving that way. I can also move my waveform that way. If I go to touch lock, whatever I do on the screen now, although the cursor's moving, I can't select anything. It's locking me out, but it can still use the keyboard, which is useful. Clear screen, which just clears the screen, particularly if you're using persistence mode and you want to clear your screen, is quite useful. Auto set is quite useful, so it just does the normal auto set. It's very quick because the signal is already set up properly. The only thing with auto set, you have to have the channels on. If you're not got a channel active, it won't. The Rigol will auto set without the channel being active. I'm pretty sure on this, although maybe they've adjusted it in the firmware, because I've now got nothing, no channels on. Oh, it looks like they've altered that. I think on the original firmware you had to have a channel on for it to auto set, but it won't. But now it looks like it will actually switch the channel on and look what inputs are coming in. So it looks like it will do that. That's quite interesting actually, because it didn't work like that. If I just try and put that onto channel 3, say, which is off, and I do an auto set, let's just see. I think it'll only do it on channel 1. I think you've got to have the channel on. If I now do an auto set, yeah, and it's trigger. The trigger's gone to orange because the channel's orange, and we're there. And I can centre it by pushing the centre button. I can alter my scaling, and I can alter my scaling that way as well, of course. And again, this has got an indent on it, which I like, because it's a very small indent, so I think it's actually quite a nice. And there you've got your reading of what your vertical sensitivity is, 38.5 millivolts per block here, so per division rather. I switch off channel 3 and plug that back into channel 1. I'll go back to auto set, and it should take me back to auto set again, which it has, and then I can then move that and I'm back to auto set. Save load button is used for saving waveforms, setups, exporting data, etc. So if we go back, sorry, let's look at that again. You've got setup, references, waveform screenshots. You can also have one touch, which is quite useful because you can use the action button here, which will then, if we look at the one touch, we've got it saving. If we just take that off, I can do screenshots. You can do a variety of things such as set up information, screenshots, waveform, CSV file, references, search data, bus table and statistics. If we've put a file name in, which I think it'll auto name will auto increment the number, and what happens then is if you've then got a USB stick in here, when you touch this button here, which is their one-shot button that looks like a camera, comes up here, error saving file. It couldn't save it because we didn't have a USB memory stick in, but if we have a memory stick in there, which I will demonstrate at a later stage, if we have a memory stick in, you can actually then save the information straight to the memory stick. You can also set up the saving of reference files, of waveforms, how they're saved and what format they're saved in, what the source of that is, so what channel it's saving, or the visible channels or just a particular channel, etc. So there's a lot of information. This I will look at once in another video, probably once we go into that into more detail, so that you can actually see exactly what you can do. But it's, in terms of getting data out of this scope, it's very powerful, both in terms of the button control here and also in terms of what's available via their own software through the USB. So it's got a protocol system on the USB, so that if this is connected to a laptop or Windows or a Mac machine, you can see this as a hard drive, like a Linux hard drive I believe, and you can then take off files, etc., and take screen grabs, etc., which we'll have a look at. It's very powerful. So that's most of those buttons there. Down here in the analysis part, we've got cursors, which are for measuring. The first one switches them on, the second one brings your menu, so you've got horizontal, vertical and horizontal, V markers, which brings a marker up that follows the waveform. I'm on horizontal at the moment. Let's change that to vertical here. I use my cursor, it's easier to do it. Source C1. You can also track the scaling, so that actually as you adjust your time base, the cursors move with the time base and keep a constant on the waveform. You can also couple the two cursors together to make them stay the same distance apart if you want to use the cursors for measuring a distance and then moving them across. But if we for a moment take those two off, which they are, and the cursors are on, you can now see that I've got one of my cursors here by line number 1, and that's my first cursor there. I'm moving with either my finger or I can do it with the mouse. Cursor number 2 is here. I'm using the mouse to pick it and move it, and I get my distances here: time 1, time 2, the delta time, and also 1 over the time to get the frequency. So if I actually put this cursor there, roughly speaking, on the top of that waveform, and take a whole cycle, so we're down, back up again till we get to that, we're sort of almost there, 951 kilohertz. We're obviously not quite sitting properly on the waveform there, but what it's telling me is that it's telling me that the frequency is almost a megahertz there. Probably the easiest way actually to get it more accurate is if I do it on the horizontal line. So I'm on that horizontal line there. If I move 1 to that, I can also use this button, which means with the indents you can get it very accurate. So if I move that to there, let me just see if I can get it dead on the actual part there. So I'm dead on that, and I'm dead on that with my cursor 1 and 2, and we can see here that time 1 is 501.2 nanoseconds before the trigger, minus. The other one is 495.2 nanoseconds positive after the trigger, which is in the center. Got a delta of 996.4 nanoseconds, which is rounded up roughly to 1 megahertz, which actually is what this sine wave is. This is a 3 volt peak to peak 1 megahertz sine wave, so we're dead right there. The cursors can either be moved with your fingers, think you can even put a position in by clicking on that. So this is the X2 position, the cursor 2 position. I'm at 495 nanoseconds. If I wanted to position that at 250 nanoseconds, I've clicked that and I've now actually moved 250 nanoseconds after my trigger position. If I want to get this one to be before it by 250 nanoseconds, can I do that? Sorry, I think I actually have to click on here. Yeah, I click on my T1 cursor, my time 1 cursor. I go 250 minus, because I'm going to the left of the trigger. And if I then click on the enter, you'll see that this cursor number 1, as I click on the enter, I must have put in the wrong figure there. 250 minus, that's it, I must have put in the wrong figure, and I'm now 1 is there, and you can see that that and that are equal, and we're actually 250 nanoseconds. I've also got my cursors switch on and off up here, so this is a shortcut to switch my cursor on and off, so I can switch them off, and I get extra space at the bottom. As I switch my cursors on up here, I get my cursor readings there. If I want to go to cursor menu, I can either do it with the key or by touching this little icon over the menu. I've then got my choice to go to cursors here, and I go down to cursors, touch that, and I bring up my cursor menu. If I've got this blue line with space under it, it means that there's more to it that I can actually scroll up and down. So if we go into a menu like acquire, I think that's got a menu where we've got space to go up and down. No, not in that one. Let's see if I've got another menu. I'm trying to think which menu has a menu that has space in it. Trigger, here's a menu. In the trigger menu, you can see that that blue line has extra space at the bottom. That's because that menu moves up and down, so it's like a scroll bar. It's telling me I can scroll up and down, so I can find my extra figures, and I can again do that with the mouse wheel. So once you're doing this with a mouse, you just literally put your mouse into that menu area, and I'm scrolling up and down, and I'm getting at the bottom there HF reject, high frequency reject, noise reject, hold off. And then when I click that, I'll bring on some more. As I click that, you can actually see the blue line extend, so there's no extension on the blue line. Click it, I get a dark area, so I can now scroll up again to my hold off time that disappears when I click away. So rather useful on that. Again, as I said, everything's controllable with the wheel in most instances, so click onto the edge. I'm on edge triggering, I can go down to width triggering, video, and all I'm doing is moving my mouse wheel. Or I can simply click on it, or if I want to, I can just touch it, click on it, click out, click again, and my menu goes away. So there's lots of options, it's just a matter of getting used to them. That's cursors. Measure is was our cursor measuring, which we just... Sorry, measuring was not cursor measuring. Measuring is our figures for measuring frequency, etc. So on here at the moment you've got 4 positions for measuring at the base. I can go here, and at the moment I've got my peak to peak set up, my frequency, my rise time, and my RMS cycle. If I want on the bottom one here, I want to say select full time, I go to type. So I'm in measurement 4, I go to type. All I go to now is I go to full time. It's now selected full time. If I click outside that menu, the menu will disappear, and now I've got here my voltage peak to peak, my frequency, my rise time, and my full time. So those are my 4 measures there. I want to go back to measure again and say I want to switch off my voltage peak to peak. I go to my 4 selectable, go to peak and switch it off, and now I've actually switched off my peak to peak but left my other ones in there. I can also go to those by literally clicking on them. So again, it's another option. I either go using the button, using the menu selection here, or alternatively, if you want to adjust a measurement such as this frequency here, if I just click on the frequency, it'll bring the menu up and it brings me straight into the frequency. I think if I click on the rise time, click on it, and it brings me straight into rise time, which is a really nice feature, because if I then want to select, say, full time, I just click on that and I've now got my full time replacing my rise time. So again, there's 3 or 4 ways of getting into the same menu, but some of them go directly. So instead of having to go measure, then select the number that you want, if you know how to do it, the easier way, and you get used to it, is literally go, I want to, this is my timing for my full time, click on my full time, go straight into the measure position 3, my full time, click on that, click on rise time, and that has changed from TF to TR for rise time. Quick measure button here gives you a quick measure screen, which gives you voltage peak to peak, the mean cycle time, the rise time and the full time, and this is being displayed at the moment on a sine wave. But if we go into the generator and we change that, so this is the built-in generator, I've got it on sine. If I change sine, say, to rectangular waveform, you'll now see that it's clear that it's still giving me my voltage peak to peak, my rise and full time again. So it works dependent, it doesn't matter whether you're on a sine wave, a square wave, it will try and work out those actual figures for you automatically. So if I go here and I select triangle wave, clear the screen, and you'll see that even on a triangle wave you've still got the voltage peak, the negative peak, the mean cycle, the rise and full time. Coming out of the quick measure, we've also got search, and this search facility allows you, very similar to the Keysight search facility and probably on other scopes, it allows you to search for edges, whether they be rising and falling edges, the width of a signal, the peaks on a signal, the rise and fall times, rump pulses. Data clock I'm not certain about at this stage, but I will look into that. And you've also got pattern, which actually is very useful, which is to do with digital decoding, and you can set up a search from either the analog channels, high, low, or doesn't matter, or including also the 16 digital channels, and you can have ands and ors, logical operators, nans and nors. You can also do pulse width. So this is actually very powerful, and I probably will put that in a video at a later stage. I have tried that briefly, but it's quite a powerful feature on this scope. Coming out of that, we've also got FFT, which gives you the FFT of the waveform, and we've got a split screen now. We've got the sine wave, we've got the triangle wave, which I altered to at the top, and at the base there we've got the FFT representation of that. We've got the starting frequency, the stopping frequency, the center point, and the span, and the relative bandwidth. This can be varied so that you can change your display proportion from your top waveform to your FFT, or if you want completely FFT you can bring it all the way up, or if you wanted a small FFT you can bring it down, and obviously you can drag this along, and that's changing your start frequency and your stop frequency. I will set up and show a proper FFT with, say, a 1 megahertz sine or square wave, and I found the FFT on this to be quite accurate actually, and I do like the way you can alter the screen balance between the two, because it means you can set it up if you want to look at the wave and then you want to look at the FFT spectrum. You can literally maximize the screen, whereas on most scopes this blocks over the actual signal. Some scopes you can switch the signal off, which I think you can on this, so you don't have to have the signal displayed. Pretty sure I'm right. Yes, still getting the FFT without the signal displayed, even though the signal's still going in, we're not displaying the signal. But with this, that's almost pointless, I think, on this particular scope, because of the way that the screen is so beautifully split that you can just organise it to all that, and when you want to look back at the waveform again you can pull it all the way down or do whatever mix you want on that, which is rather nice. Coming out of FFT again. Oh, and on FFT, sorry, I should have said that on FFT you've got your sources selectable from channel 1, 2, 3, 4. Only got one at the moment because I've only got channel 1 on. Blackman, you've got your different type of display, so Hamming, Blackman, flat top and rectangle. You've got dBm, dBV and VEFF. You've also got on your waveform the actual spectrum, the minimum hold, so it will actually hold the minimum value, the maximum hold and the average. And on average you can ask it to number of averages that you want it to display, to average out in the display so that you get a better signal quality. But I'll go through this when we look through the FFT again. Switch the FFT off. I just push that and I push that and the FFT has gone away. Just clear that search menu down here just to get rid of that. So we've got the maximum screen again. Go back into generator again, go from triangle to sine, double click and we're away again. Protocol we've spoken about earlier on, which is to do with protocol decoding, and I'm going to go into that in detail. The last one we've been through generator, which gives you basically your waveform generator, function generator, which is an option. You've also got sweep on this, so you've not just got a standard function generator that's quite powerful in that you've got just a DC signal. You've got sine, sync C, which we can go down, so that's sine, sync C, rectangle, pulse, triangle, ramp, arbitrary if you set up one, exponential, either this knob to dial in the frequency, or if you want to actually put the exact frequency in, which is far more accurate, you just click on it and then you can use either the mouse, or alternatively if I want to put in say 1.25 megahertz M, I've now got a frequency and it's showing me here 1.25 megahertz. My amplitude is there. I can alter my amplitude on that and you can see the waveform amplitude changing. I can do the same thing again, I think, with my mouse wheel. Clicked on the outside of it. Let's go back into generator by accident. Not easy to use the mouse wheel from here. Yeah, and I'm now using my mouse wheel to dial up the waveform and dial the waveform down here, so that's quite useful. So you can either do it by entering it directly, entering it off the keyboard, or using the mouse. And I think you can also use a USB keyboard, although I haven't tried it. You've got your offset, your noise, so you can dial in noise, which is quite nice. So if you want to add noise to a signal, so I'm now putting in 30% of noise, and it's triggering slightly strangely because of so much noise on that, but if I dial it back you can see the noise on the signal. If I want to get rid of that noise, say put 30% in. If I then go into my acquisition menu and I go into average, I go into menu, I can dial up my averages now, and if I put my averages say to 20, I'm actually getting rid of my noise again. So I put noise in but put it onto average mode. If I go back to normal on my acquisition, so where are we on that? So I've scrolled down. Acquisition quiet mode, sorry, is here sample, which is your normal sample, peak detect, which gives you your peak detects from the waveform, high resolution, averaging that we've just been through, envelope mode that generates an envelope and shows the sort of these signals an envelope, and you've got envelope with peak detect, so you've got a lot of different acquisition modes there. Not very clear signal because I've got so much noise dialed in. If I clear that and take my noise back out, now if I now use the clear screen button, I'll get rid of my rogue signals there that I've got for persistence, because I had it in the detection mode that was giving me, where are we, acquisition, I was in my envelope mode that sort of gives you persistence view on it so that you get your envelope. All of these are explained actually in the top, which is rather nice, so you can actually see what's happening in the top here. So when you go to sample, it tells you where the ADC is pulling up the sample. peak detect, it tells you about the peak detects on the waveform. The high resolution will tell you about its sampling to get the highest resolution, so it gives you a help there. You've also got a help button where when you're in this mode it then gives you acquire mode, and it tells you sample, peak detect, high resolution. It tells you a little bit about the modes that you're in, and again got a scroll bar because of this blue line there. We're in a scroll bar, so I'm sure I can see where my mouse is. Yeah. Okay, that one doesn't look like I can do it with a mouse because I don't know where my mouse is, but I can just scroll up and down and you can see the scroll bar moving. Coming out of the help, I can either push help again, or I can just do the close on the X triangle and we're closed. Well, I think I've come to the end almost of my short introduction, which actually is not a short introduction, it's gone on about 40 minutes. But I intend to make quite a few more videos showing this being used, also on the decoding. What I should also mention just briefly, I think I touched on it before, is you've got an app button here which gives you your certain applications that are built into the scope and an easy way to access them, such as the scope, the quick measure way. So we can just go to quick measure here and it goes straight to quick measure. If I go back to my app selector, Fft Mask, so you've got mask ability, which I'll go into in due course. You've got a meter mode on this scope as well, so you've got a voltmeter built in that you can sense from any of your analog channels 1 through to 4. If we go into that, it's bringing me up my meter here. I think I can move that as well. Should be able to bring it. Yeah, I can move it. Let me just see what we're on. We're on DC. If we're on yeah, AC plus DC RMS, now that signal is giving me 830 millivolts. This can be selected. I double click on it, it brings me the menu, and I can select a source C1 through to C4. I can select a DC value if it was just a straightforward DC signal. I can select AC plus DC RMS or AC RMS root mean squared. So that's quite useful. You can switch the meter on and off and bring that display. Quite a few scopes have this sort of meter built in, but it's rather nice. When I go back to that again, you've got a trigger counter that's very useful. So you've actually got a, now that's showing that the trigger signal that's coming into this is 1.25 megahertz, which is dead right, and you've also got the trigger width as well, and you can click it to change it to the signal width, or the smaller one here is the actual trigger count, and again that can be positioned anywhere, which is rather nice on the scope. And I think again that you don't have to have the channel working on for that. So if I put that on and now I switch off, yeah, it's still showing me my value here. So even though I'm not looking at my signal, I'm still getting the trigger count coming through. If I remove my signal, the scope, and that scope probe is coming out of the function generator, and that's the end of the probe. You can see it drops out now. It's not on the channel, but if I reconnect, we'll still get a signal very quickly, and we've got the trigger count. If I want to see that signal, if I want to switch on the channel, I can do it by this button, or as I said before, if I click on this bottom here or touch the bottom there, it brings my channel straight on. If I want to close my channel off, I can click on that again and click off. So again, there's so many different ways of accessing features on this. I can put a ground signal on it by doing it there, take the ground signal off. I can alter my probe attenuation here, so 1 to 1, 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1000 to 1, and set a user amount. Also very handily, you can go from volts to amps, so if you're using a current probe you can actually set this up to amps, and then all your readings here, so I've got it now 1.18 amps, so it gives you your readings as an amp instead of in volts, which is rather nice. Go back out of that, go back out of that. If I want to close my trigger count down, I can just do it by doing that, and my trigger count has gone away. Going back into the apps again, probe adjust, which I think there's a number of videos out there. It shows a way of putting the probe across these inputs here and it actually shows you how to adjust the high frequency and low frequency adjust to get the best square wave will come out of that. But you only really need to do that once. My generator's gone off because of that, so if I push my generator on, push that back on, it will remember my last figures, I believe. Why is that not coming on? Maybe I knocked the signal. Not sure why my signal's not coming on there. Actually, I'm not sure why. I've got my function generator not coming in. Obviously missing something there, and I'm not sure why. I've got that set right round. Not sure why that's gone off there. Let's just try and do a auto set. I don't think I had it switched on properly over here. I must have missed something, but anyway, that's back there to auto set. Let's switch off the quick measure, which I must have had on by accident. Okay, so that's our signal back on again. Also here, function generator and pattern generator. The pattern generator is quite useful because the pattern generator allows you to send out signals via these points here and create different types of signals. I'll do a video on that because it's quite in depth. What also is nice, these side of up here are fixed, so all the icons from here are fixed, but the icons on the other side are basically user definable. So this is my zoom, this is my meter button. Click on and off my FFT, I can click on and off, take it out. You can see straight away that we've got a peak around there, which would be around the 1 meg, I believe. And in actual fact, if you put the cursors on, you can actually put cursors on. They're in the spectrum, it's in the vertical. I'll just take out coupling. So I've got that. I think I've got my cursors in the wrong one. So let's put it into FFT spectrum. Right, so I've now got my cursor here. If I move that cursor over to there, we can see it's a very tight spectrum there, but we can see that that cursor is on about the 1 megahertz, which is the, so my cursor's lined up with that. I've got such a wide span here, I'm not getting a clean enough definition here, but you're getting your primary, which is your peak there, coming up at the 1 megahertz, which would be right because this is a 1 megahertz signal. You can see when I move my cursor over, I'm getting 1.01 megahertz, but the span is too great. But that's my FFT selected via here. I can switch my FFT off and it'll go back into full screen mode again. Annotation, which means you can draw on the screen, so if you want to make notes on things, do that, leave it for a second and it will go out of that mode. If I want to delete it, I can actually use like a rubber on there to rub that out, and I can also do that with my finger, so you can write notes on top, etc. That's an undo and redo, which is quite useful, so you can step backwards and forwards a bit like on a word processor, which is quite useful. You can see it's moving my cursors. That was where my last input was obviously moving my cursors, and you can see it's moving those backwards and forwards. If I go into this, that actually allows me to organise what buttons are set up here. So if I remove, for instance, my FFT, so I've removed my FFT there, but I want to put say my search, I've now put a search icon there, so now when I click on that it'll go into search. So if I close that down, I've defined my choosable ones now as a search here, and when I click on it I go into my search mode and it brings up my search table down here. Come out of search mode and I come out. So these on this side are all user definable. You just, the ones that are selected are blue here, so we can take them all out of here. So these all come out and they're all taken out of here, and then when you want to put them back in again, or the ones you want to choose, you just click on whichever ones and it puts them back into the top again, which is quite nice. Preset, run, stop, and you've screenshot, save and set up, zoom mode, and you've got search. So we've got those number that you put there, 2, 4, 6, I think 8 that you can put in. Close that down, and now if I click on my zoom, I'm back into my zoom window, and that's that. So that's my choosable ones. There is an awful lot more on this scope, but I think for the moment I'll leave it at that, and then in the next video we'll take it further forward, looking at some signals and also looking at the decode as well, which I think is probably the next stage video that I'll do, because the decoding on this is extremely powerful and very fast, because it's done in the FPGA on this scope and not in software, so it's sort of as quick as the Keysight 3000 and 2000 series, and substantially quicker than my Rigol, which is very slow. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll be back very shortly with another video explaining further.